My name is Eddie. I was 23 when this happened. I lived with my mom in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. Brick houses, chain-link fences, basketball hoops rusting in driveways. The kind of street where everybody waves but nobody really talks. I'd been driving for Uber since the pandemic hit, back when I was 20 and every other option dried up. By the time this story starts, it was the only thing I knew how to do. Wake up, car, strangers, home, eat, sleep, repeat. I had a girlfriend for a while, a girl named Brooke. Blonde, sweet, easy to be around, but that fizzled the way things do when neither person has the energy to fight for it. She stopped coming over on weekends. I stopped texting first. One day we both knew it was done without either of us saying the words, so I was alone, not lonely exactly, but aware of the quiet in a way that made me wonder if the quiet was all there was ever going to be. Across the street lived a couple I barely knew. The guy was older, probably mid-50s, always dressed like he was heading to an office even on Saturdays. The woman was younger, a lot younger, early 30s at most. They had 3 kids, all under 7 or 8, and the kids were the only reason I ever noticed them, because those little ones were loud. I didn't know their names. We'd exchange the standard nod, maybe a quick morning if we happened to be outside at the same time. They were strangers who happened to sleep 40 feet from where I slept. Then one afternoon, my mum came into the kitchen while I was eating cereal and dropped the news like she'd been holding it in all day. She told me the couple across the street had split up. The husband came home early from work and found her in bed with another man. My mum said the whole street was talking about it. The other man was supposedly young, really young, barely out of his teens. She kept shaking her head while she talked, doing that thing she does when she's judging someone but wants to seem like she isn't. The poor man out there working, she said, and that woman home with 3 babies doing God knows what. I listened, finished my cereal, moved on. It wasn't my business. People's marriages fall apart for 1,000 reasons, and the version that reaches the neighbors is almost never the real one. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't change the way I looked at that house. Not in a judgmental way, more like the way you notice a building after someone tells you it's haunted. You don't believe it, but you can't stop glancing at the windows. A few weeks passed. I drove my shifts, came home, helped my mum with groceries, kept my car clean because a dirty Uber loses you ratings. Then one Friday evening, right around sunset, I was parked in the driveway vacuuming the back seat with the doors open and a playlist going through a cheap Bluetooth speaker. I wasn't thinking about anything. My mind was blank the way it gets when you're doing something physical and repetitive. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, do you have a second?" I turned around and there she was, the woman from across the street, standing at the edge of my driveway in a white t-shirt and jeans, dark hair pulled back, looking at me like she'd been working up the courage to walk over for a while. I'd never spoken to her beyond a 2-word greeting, not once in all the years we'd lived on the same street. And now she was standing in my driveway with her arms crossed loosely, almost hugging herself, like she was cold even though it was 70 degrees out. She asked if I drove for Uber. I said, yeah, that was me. She needed a ride to Myrtle Beach the next morning, early with her 3 kids. Her brother was supposed to take them, but something came up. She wanted to know if I'd do it. I told her I could give her a fair price. We agreed on a number. She smiled, relieved, thanked me, and turned to walk back across the street. I watched her go, and up close, for the first time, I realized she was beautiful. Not in a flashy way, more like a quiet kind of pretty that hits you a second after you look away. The kind where you suddenly think, wait, and look again. Brown eyes, clear skin, the kind of posture that tells you she'd been through enough to learn how to carry herself with care. Her name was Karen. I'd learned that the next morning, sitting in the front seat of my car, driving 3 hours to the beach with her 3 kids asleep in the back, and her voice filling up every quiet corner of my life like warm water pouring into a glass I didn't know was empty. What I didn't know yet was that the ride to Myrtle Beach was going to lead to the best night of my life and the worst night of my life, and they were going to be the same night. And the distance between everything I wanted and everything I lost was going to be measured in something smaller than courage, a single pill I was too proud to swallow. I pulled up at 6 the next morning. Karen came out with the kids. That was the first time I learned her name right there in the car, because until that moment she was just the woman across the street. She sat up front, kids buckled in the back, and we drove. Something happened on that drive that I wasn't expecting. We talked. Not small talk, not the polite surface stuff you do with someone you barely know. Real conversation, the kind that makes 3 hours feel like 40 minutes. She asked about my work, what it was like spending all day in a car with strangers. I asked about her kids, their ages, their personalities. She told me about the oldest, a boy named Miles, who was 6 and already obsessed with dinosaurs to the point where he corrected adults on pronunciation. She laughed when she told me that, and her laugh was warm and a little self-conscious, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be that happy in front of someone she'd just met. About an hour in, she asked me about Brooke, said she used to see a blonde girl at my place on weekends and wondered what happened. I told her we broke up, kept it simple. Then I turned the question around carefully and asked about her husband. I pretended I didn't know anything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said they'd separated, too much fighting. She added quickly that they were on good terms, that he still came around to see the kids regularly. I nodded, said nothing, but a thought crossed my mind that I couldn't shake. If they were on such good terms, why didn't she ask him to drive the kids to the beach? Something about her answer didn't fit, and in that gap between what she said and what made sense, I felt the first pull of curiosity. Not about gossip, about her, about all the things she was choosing not to say, while saying just enough to make me want to hear the rest. We got to the rental house a little after 9. I helped unload bags, got the kids' stuff out of the trunk. When it came time to settle up, her banking app wouldn't load. She tried 3 or 4 times, apologized. I told her not to worry, she could send it whenever. Gave her my number as the payment key. We said goodbye. The kids waved from the porch. I got back in the car. I should have driven straight home, that was the plan. But the weather was perfect, that kind of clear blue sky that makes you feel guilty for being inside, and I hadn't been to the beach in over a year. So I parked near the boardwalk, found a coffee shop, ordered breakfast and sat there watching the ocean through the window. It felt good, like something I hadn't given myself permission to do in a long time. Around 11, my phone buzzed. Karen. She'd sent the payment and a message asking if I'd made it home okay. I took a photo of the view from where I was sitting, the wooden railing of the cafe patio, a sliver of ocean beyond the dunes, my iced tea sweating on the table, and sent it back. Didn't leave yet. Taking a little beach day for myself, she wrote back almost immediately. Seriously? It's so gorgeous out today. If I didn't have 3 kids hanging off me, I'd come join you for that drink. I read that message twice, maybe 3 times. There was something in it that went beyond friendly. Or maybe I was reading into it the way you do when you want something to mean more than it does. I drove home that afternoon. 20 minutes from Columbus, she texted again. Asked if I was still at the beach. I said no, almost home. She replied, ugh, too bad. I was going to invite you to grab dinner with us on the boardwalk tonight. There it was again, that feeling. Like she was leaving doors open and watching to see if I'd walk through them. Over the next few days, the texts didn't stop. Photos of the kids building sandcastles, a sunset shot from the balcony of the rental, a picture of a plate of shrimp tacos with the caption, "Wish you were here to judge my cooking." None of it was overtly flirtatious, but all of it felt intentional. Each message was a small step closer, a bridge being built one plank at a time, and she was watching to see if I noticed. By midweek, she sent one that made me put my phone down and sit in my car for a full minute. You working hard up there while I'm living my best life down here? Seems unfair. There was a winking emoji after it. I stared at that emoji like it was evidence in a case I was building inside my own chest. Saturday morning, she asked if I could pick them up the next day. Same rate as before, I said, of course. I pulled up to the rental house on Sunday after lunch. Karen came out the front door, and the moment I saw her, I knew something had shifted. She was wearing a sundress, yellow with small white flowers, her hair down, wavy from the salt air. She looked different. Not just pretty. Present. Like she'd decided something before I arrived and was already 3 steps ahead of me in a conversation we hadn't started yet. She smiled when she saw me, and it wasn't the polite neighbor smile from before. It was slower, it stayed. The drive back was different too. The kids fell asleep within the first hour, and we talked quietly in the front seat, voices low so we wouldn't wake them. She told me about her week, about a jellyfish Miles found, about a thunderstorm that knocked the power out for half a night. She asked about mine with a genuine interest that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. We stopped at a gas station halfway home so the kids could use the restroom, and while they were inside with Miles watching the younger two, Karen and I stood by the car in the parking lot, and she looked at me in a way that made my chest tight. Not nervous, tight. Full tight. Like there was suddenly too much happening inside me for my body to hold. When I dropped them off that evening, she leaned across the center console and kissed me on the cheek. Lingered just a second longer than casual. I could smell her perfume, something warm and sweet that stayed in the car for hours. That night she texted goodnight. I texted back, and we kept going, back and forth, deeper each time, until the messages stopped feeling like conversation and started feeling like a current pulling us somewhere specific. A few days later, on a Saturday afternoon, she sent the message that changed everything. The kids were with their dad for the weekend. She wanted to know if I was free. Dinner, maybe drinks. I smiled when I read it. Actually smiled, sitting alone in my car in a parking lot between rides. Because the thing I'd been sensing since that first drive, the thing I kept second-guessing and talking myself out of, was real. She wanted to see me, not as a neighbor, not as her Uber driver. She wanted to be with me, and she was done pretending otherwise. I picked her up that evening. She got in the car and the perfume hit me immediately, stronger this time, deliberate, filling the space between us with something that made it hard to think about anything except her. We drove to a restaurant downtown, dim lighting, small tables. We sat across from each other and talked like two people who'd been waiting for exactly this. She laughed at things I said that weren't even that funny. I listened to her like every word mattered, because in that moment, every word did. After dinner, we walked to the parking lot, and something in the air cracked open. I don't know who moved first, maybe both of us at the same time. But we kissed, right there between two parked cars under a row of streetlights, and it wasn't careful or cautious or tentative. It was hungry. We stood there for maybe 15 minutes kissing like two people who'd been holding their breath for weeks, and finally exhaled at the same time. When we pulled apart, she looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. Half smile, half dare. I took her hand. We walked to my car. I'm going to be honest about what happened next, because this whole story only makes sense if I tell the truth, and the truth is what's been eating me alive. We drove to a motel off the highway, one of those places with neon signs and rooms you pay for by the hour. We checked in, walked down the hallway. She was holding my hand and I could feel her pulse in her fingertips, or maybe that was mine, I couldn't tell anymore. We got into the room and she kissed me before the door was fully closed, her hands pulling at my shirt, my hands on her waist, everything happening fast and urgent and exactly the way I'd imagined it 100 times over the past 2 weeks. She was beautiful. She was right there. She wanted me and I wanted her, and there was absolutely nothing standing between us. Nothing except my own body. I don't know how to say this without feeling the same shame I felt that night, so I'll just say it straight. When the moment arrived to move past everything else and do what we both came there to do, I couldn't. My body shut down. Like someone flipped a switch inside me and everything went dark. She tried to help. She was patient, gentle, encouraging. Did everything a person could do in that situation. Nothing worked. I was 23 years old. I was healthy. I was with a woman I was wildly attracted to, and my body completely betrayed me. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I've ever heard. I couldn't look at her. I stared at the ceiling and said the most useless sentence a man can say in that moment. I don't know what happened. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she sat up, touched my arm and said, "It's okay. It happens. Don't worry about it." Her voice was kind, but I could hear something underneath it. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of a question she didn't want to ask out loud. She got up and started getting dressed without another word. I lay there for a moment that lasted a year, then got up and put my clothes on in silence. The drive home was brutal. The perfume that had filled the car with warmth earlier now felt suffocating, a reminder of everything that should have happened and didn't. I pulled up in front of her house. She said goodnight softly. I watched her walk across the lawn and disappear through her front door. Then I sat in my car for 20 minutes with my forehead against the steering wheel, alone in the dark, with the taste of her still on my lips and a shame so heavy it pressed me into the seat like gravity had doubled. I was 23, and the only thing that had gone wrong that night was me. The next morning I woke up and checked my phone before my eyes were fully open. Nothing from her. No goodnight text I'd missed, no casual morning message, nothing. Just the last thread of our conversation from the day before. All those flirty messages stacked on top of each other like a staircase that led to a locked room. I put the phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. I replayed the night in a loop, not the good parts, the other part. The silence. The way her hand had moved to my arm and then stopped. The way she'd said it's okay with a voice that meant it wasn't. The sound of her getting dressed in a room so quiet, I could hear the fabric of her shirt sliding over her skin. And underneath all of it, this pulsing, grinding, relentless question that I couldn't answer and couldn't stop asking. Why? Why did my body do that? I was attracted to her. More than attracted. I wanted her so badly my hands had been shaking when we walked down that motel hallway. Every part of me was ready except the one part that mattered, and it had just gone dark like a fuse blowing in a house that looked perfectly wired from the outside. I was 23. I'd never had this problem before. Not with Brooke, not with anyone. So why now? Why her? Why the one time in my life when it mattered more than it had ever mattered? I didn't have an answer. And the absence of an answer was worse than a bad one, because at least a bad answer gives you something to fix. This was just a void, a malfunction with no error code. Around noon she texted, 4 words that landed like a brick wrapped in velvet. Can I ask you something? My stomach dropped. I already knew where this was going, but I typed back, of course. There was a pause. The 3 little dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then the message came through, and I read every word like someone reading their own verdict. She said she couldn't stop thinking about what happened. She said she'd been up half the night going over it, and she needed to know if it was her, if something about her didn't do it for me, if maybe she'd misread the whole thing and I wasn't actually attracted to her. Then she asked me, point blank, "Do you think I'm beautiful?" That question broke something inside me, not because it was cruel. It was the opposite. It was vulnerable and honest and completely misdirected, because the answer was so obvious to me that I couldn't believe she had to ask. This woman, this beautiful, warm, complicated woman who had walked across a street and into my life and made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, was lying in her bed across the road from mine, wondering if she wasn't attractive enough because of me, because my body had failed and her brain had translated that failure into a judgment about herself. I called her. Didn't want to do this over text. She picked up on the second ring, and I could tell by her voice she'd been crying, or close to it. I told her she was beautiful. I told her it had nothing to do with her, not even a little bit. I said I'd been tense, nervous, overwhelmed, that I'd had too much wine at dinner, that the whole thing caught me off guard even though I'd wanted it more than anything. I was talking fast, stacking excuses on top of each other like sandbags in front of a flood that was already inside the house. Then I said the thing that sealed everything that came after. I asked for another chance. I told her next time would be different. I promised. And when I said it, I meant it with every cell in my body, because I'd already started thinking about what I would do to make sure it never happened again. There were pills for this. I'd get them. I'd do whatever it took. She went quiet. Then she said, okay. Not enthusiastic, not excited. Just okay. The way someone agrees to something they want to believe in but can't quite commit to. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed with my elbows on my knees and my head in my hands, replaying her tone, trying to figure out if okay meant I believe you or I'll go along with this, but I already know how it ends. The days that followed were strange. We still texted, but the texture of the messages changed. The flirtiness was gone, replaced by something more careful, like two people walking on ice and trying not to look down. She sent fewer photos. Her replies came slower. I could feel her pulling back in tiny increments, and each one felt like a small door closing somewhere I couldn't reach. I went to a pharmacy 3 days after the motel, walked in, waited until the line was empty, and asked the guy behind the counter for the pills, the kind you don't need a prescription for. He didn't blink, didn't ask questions, just handed me a small white box in a paper bag and rang it up. I paid in cash because I didn't want it showing up on any statement my mom might see. Walked out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and put the bag in the glove compartment. It sat there, behind the owner's manual, next to a tire gauge and a handful of napkins. A tiny white bag containing the solution to the biggest problem in my life, within arm's reach every single time I got in the car. I told myself I wouldn't need it. I told myself I was 23 and healthy, and the first time was a fluke, a one-off, a glitch. I told myself that my body would work, that it would show up for me when it mattered, that I could trust it the way I always had. I was negotiating with reality, and reality doesn't negotiate. About 2 weeks later, we got another chance. Her ex took the kids for the weekend again, and she suggested we get together. When I read her message, the first thing I felt wasn't excitement. It was dread. A cold, heavy dread that sat in my stomach like a swallowed stone. Because the moment I started thinking about being with her again, my brain went straight to the last time, straight to that room, straight to that silence, straight to the look on her face when she realized nothing was going to happen. And the more I tried to push that image out of my head, the deeper it dug in, like a splinter working its way toward bone. I should have taken the pill. I knew that. The bag was right there in my glove compartment. I could feel its presence every time I opened the compartment to grab a napkin or check the registration. It was like a confession waiting to be made, a single honest act that would have changed everything. All I had to do was open the bag, swallow one small tablet, and let chemistry do what pride wouldn't allow. But something in me refused. Some stupid, stubborn, idiotic piece of my ego told me I didn't need it, told me that taking it meant admitting something was actually wrong, and I wasn't ready to admit that. I wanted to prove to myself that my body would work, that it could be trusted, that whatever happened in that motel room was an accident, not a pattern. I chose pride over honesty. I chose the version of myself I wanted to be over the version that actually existed. That choice is the one I pay for every single day. I drove to her place Saturday evening. She came outside looking incredible. Dark jeans, a top that showed her collarbone, her hair down. I remember the exact moment she got in the car because her perfume hit me and my mind split into 2 tracks running in opposite directions. One track was desire, real, immediate, undeniable. The other was fear, just as real, just as immediate, running underneath like a second heartbeat that was beating faster than the first. We went to the same motel, different room, same hallway, same buzzing fluorescent light above the vending machine. She kissed me when we walked in, and I kissed her back, and for a few minutes everything felt right, felt possible, felt like the reset I'd been desperate for. And then it happened again. The exact same thing, the exact same shutdown, like my body had memorized the failure and decided to play it back, frame by frame, beat by beat. I could feel it slipping away in real time, this horrible awareness of something going wrong that I couldn't stop, like watching a glass fall off a table in slow motion and knowing my hand was never going to get there fast enough. She tried to help, same as before, patient, gentle, but the patience felt different this time. It felt like effort, like she was trying because she felt she owed it to the situation, not because she believed it would change anything. When she realized it wasn't going to happen, she didn't say a word. Not "it's okay," not "don't worry," nothing. She just exhaled, long and slow, like someone setting down something heavy they'd been carrying across a room, not in relief, but in resignation. And that exhale was louder than any sentence she could have spoken. It was the sound of a woman deciding something she didn't want to decide. She sat on the edge of the bed with her back to me. I lay there looking at the ceiling. 3 feet of mattress between us. It might as well have been the width of everything I'd ever wanted and would never reach. I wanted to say something, anything, but what? I don't know what happened again. The same line, recycled, even more pathetic the second time? There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse, so I said nothing. And she said nothing. And we got dressed in a room so quiet I could hear the zipper of her jeans and the click of her earring being removed, and the sound of a woman putting herself back together after being let down by someone she'd given a second chance she didn't have to give. The drive home was worse than the first time. The first time there'd been a shred of hope that it was an accident, a bad night, a fluke that would correct itself with time and confidence and maybe another glass of wine. Now there was no hope, there was just evidence. 2 data points making a line, and the line pointed straight down into a place I didn't want to look at. She stared out the passenger window the entire ride. I stared at the road. Neither of us pretended there was anything left to say. I pulled up to her house. She thanked me in a voice so flat it barely qualified as sound. She got out and walked to her front door without looking back. I remember the yellow glow from the porch light catching her hair as she turned the key, and I remember thinking, very clearly, that was the last time I'll see her that close. I sat in my driveway for a long time after she went inside. Then I opened the glove compartment. The white paper bag was right there, exactly where I'd put it 2 weeks ago. I opened it, looked at the pill, and I felt a rage so deep and so specific it made my hands shake on the steering wheel. Not at the pill, not at her, not at my body, at myself, at my own cowardice dressed up as pride, at the 23-year-old idiot who had the solution in his hand and chose ego over everything. I had the fix, I had it the whole time, and I was too proud to use it, because using it meant admitting I was broken. And I would rather fail twice in front of a woman I was falling in love with, in a room I was paying for by the hour, than admit to myself that I needed help with something I thought real men didn't need help with. Real men. That's what was underneath it. That's the lie that ruined everything. Real men don't need pills. Real men perform. Real men show up. Real men don't sit on the edge of a motel bed in the dark, unable to look at the woman beside them, with a pharmacy bag in their car that they're too ashamed to open. I believed that lie the way I believed the sun would come up, and it cost me the only person who'd made the sun worth watching rise. After that night, everything changed. She didn't text me the next day, or the day after. On the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. I sent her a message, long, desperate. I told her I missed her. I said I'd been thinking about her non-stop. I told her for the first time directly that I'd gotten the medication, that I had it now, that I was ready, that if she gave me one more chance, I would make it right. I typed it out in one long, unbroken confession that I reread 6 times before sending and immediately regretted the second it delivered. Her reply came an hour later. It was polite. It was final. She said she was tired, that the kids had worn her out, that it probably wasn't a good idea. Then she added a line that was clearly meant to be kind, but hit me like a fist to the center of my chest. She said, maybe I should talk to a doctor, that it might be something worth looking into. For your own good, she wrote. I read those words and felt something collapse inside me. Not anger, something deeper and quieter and more permanent. A surrender. She wasn't going to give me another chance, because in her mind it was already over. 2 failures back to back, and whatever attraction she'd felt, whatever curiosity had pulled her across the street to my driveway that Friday evening, it was gone. Replaced by something I couldn't fight, because you can't fight pity. You can't argue with awkwardness. You can't make a case against the simple human calculation that life is too short to keep showing up to a room where nothing happens. And the cruelest part, the part that sat in my chest like a hot coal that wouldn't cool, was that she was right. About the doctor. About all of it. She was right, and I'd known she was right before she said it, and I'd had the chance to make it irrelevant by opening a white paper bag and swallowing a single pill, and I didn't. Because my pride told me I was too young and too healthy and too much of a man to need help with something that should just work. My pride. My stupid, reckless 23-year-old pride. The most expensive thing I've ever owned. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, the texting stopped. The flirting that had built like a wave over weeks and weeks crested and fell and pulled back into nothing, leaving behind only the flat, empty beach of 2 people who live 14 steps apart and have nothing left to say to each other. And that's when the real punishment began, not the failure itself. I could have survived the failure if she'd lived across town, across the state, anywhere I didn't have to see her face every single day. The punishment was the proximity. The daily, grinding, inescapable proximity of living 40 feet from a woman who knew the most humiliating thing about me. The first time I saw her after that last night was 3 days later. I was pulling into the driveway, coming home from a shift, and she was in her front yard with the kids. Miles was riding a tricycle in circles. The 2 younger ones were on a blanket. She looked up when my car pulled in, and our eyes met for maybe half a second before I looked away and kept driving. I didn't stop. I didn't park. I drove past my own driveway and circled the block, and when I came back, she'd gone inside. That became the pattern. I started living my life around her schedule. I learned what time she took the kids outside, what time she watered the plants, what time she walked to the mailbox. I adjusted my shifts so I'd leave early and come home late. I started using the side door of the house instead of the front because the front door faced her yard. I was a prisoner in my own home, not locked in by walls or chains or threats, locked in by shame. A shame so big that I couldn't look at its source without feeling my face go hot and my stomach drop and my hands reach for car keys so I could drive somewhere, anywhere, that wasn't 14 steps from the woman who knew what I couldn't do. On the rare occasions when we did cross paths, the interaction was its own kind of violence. A quick nod, a mumbled hey. Eyes that started to connect and then flinched away like touching a hot surface. I could feel her discomfort too, this shared awkwardness that hung between us like humidity, and the worst part was knowing we were both uncomfortable for different reasons. She was uncomfortable because a man she'd been intimate with couldn't perform, and now lived across the street staring at her house. I was uncomfortable because the most private failure of my life was walking around in a sundress watering plants 40 feet from my bedroom window. We'd chosen the same strategy without discussing it. Avoidance. 2 people pretending the other didn't exist, while being constantly, painfully, microscopically aware of exactly where the other one was at every moment of every day. My mom noticed. Of course she did. She asked me once why I always rushed inside when Karen was out front. I told her I was just tired from driving all day. She gave me that look, the one over the glasses, the one that says I know you're lying, but I'm choosing not to press it, because whatever you're hiding is probably something I don't want to hear. She was right about that. The real answer was something I could never, under any circumstances, say to my mother. Hey, Mom, you know the neighbor you gossip about? I slept with her. Twice. Except I didn't. Because both times my body shut down like a computer crashing during the one presentation that mattered, and now I can't look at her without wanting to dissolve into the concrete. No. Some things stay locked in a room inside your chest where the only visitor is you. The worst moments were the ones I couldn't prepare for, coming home one evening and finding her standing at the end of my driveway, talking to my mum, the 2 of them just chatting, casual, neighborly, my mum's hand on her hip, Karen's arms crossed, laughing about something. I froze in the car for 5 full seconds before getting out, walked past them with a nod so fast it barely registered as human interaction. My mum called after me, asked if I wanted to say hello. I said I had to use the bathroom and disappeared inside so quickly I nearly tripped on the front step. Through the window I watched them keep talking, and I imagined my mum asking Karen how she was doing, asking about the kids, asking perfectly innocent questions while standing 3 feet from a woman who had seen me at my most vulnerable and my most pathetic, and the thought of those 2 worlds touching, my mother's world and that motel room, made my skin crawl so badly I had to go sit in the bathroom with the fan on until I heard the front door close. Or the time I was checking the mail and Karen pulled into her driveway with the kids, our eyes locked through her windshield. Half a second, maybe less. But in that half second, I saw recognition, memory, and something else I couldn't name. Something that might have been sadness or might have been relief that I was standing on my side of the street, and she was on hers. I grabbed my mail and went inside so fast the screen door bounced off the frame. For the Saturday morning when Miles, her oldest, her 6-year-old dinosaur expert, came running across the street chasing a ball that had rolled into our yard. I was sitting on the porch with a coffee. He grabbed the ball, looked up at me and said, with the brutal honesty only children are capable of, "My mum says we can't go to your house anymore. How's that for a gut punch?" A 6-year-old delivering the verdict his mother was too polite to say out loud, standing in my yard with a rubber ball and no idea what his words had just done to the man sitting on the steps above him. I smiled, said something like, "That's okay, buddy." He ran back across the street. I went inside and stood at the kitchen sink with both hands on the counter and my head down, breathing through something that felt like drowning, except my lungs worked fine. That was the thing I couldn't escape. The cruelest irony of all of it. It wasn't a lack of desire. That was what haunted me most. What chewed at me in the dark hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, when the apartment was silent and her porch light was the only thing visible through my window. I was attracted to her. Wildly, painfully, undeniably attracted to her. I wanted her every single time I saw her, when she was across the street in sweatpants with a kid on her hip, when she was getting the mail in shorts and a tank top, when I couldn't sleep and I'd stand at the window and see the glow from her kitchen and imagine her in there, moving through her own night, living her own life, existing in a space I'd been invited into and ejected from by my own body. My mind wanted her. My heart wanted her. Every part of me wanted her, except the one part that mattered in that room. And I will never, for as long as I live, fully understand why. One night I lay in bed and seriously considered moving. Just packing up and finding an apartment across town, somewhere I'd never have to see her face or her porch light or her kids' toys scattered in the yard. Because every time I saw any of it, the memory hit. Not in fragments, in full, vivid, merciless detail. The perfume, the motel hallway, the buzzing fluorescent light above the vending machine, her hands, her patience, and then the silence. That silence that was louder than any sound I'd ever heard. The silence of a woman realizing that the man she'd chosen to be vulnerable with couldn't meet her there. I didn't move. I couldn't afford to. And part of me knew that running from the geography wouldn't fix what was broken, because what was broken wasn't on a street in Columbus. It was inside me. 3 months after the second motel night, I did what Karen had suggested in her last real message to me. I saw a doctor. I sat in a waiting room with my knee bouncing, surrounded by people twice my age, flipping through magazines about heart health and cholesterol. And when the nurse called my name, I walked into an exam room and explained to a stranger in a white coat that I was 23 years old and couldn't perform with the most beautiful woman I'd ever touched. I said the words out loud for the first time, and they tasted exactly the way I thought they would, like swallowing something sharp that cuts on the way down. The doctor was professional, kind even. He ran blood work, checked my hormones, did a physical. When the results came back, he told me what I already suspected but didn't want to hear. There was nothing physically wrong with me. Everything was functioning exactly the way it should, which meant the problem wasn't mechanical. It was electrical. The wiring was fine. The signal was being blocked somewhere between my brain and my body by something that didn't show up on a blood panel. He called it performance anxiety, said it was more common than people think, especially in younger guys, especially in high-pressure first encounters. He explained it in clinical terms that somehow made it worse. The first failure created a fear response. The fear response caused the second failure. And now the two failures had wired together in my brain like a feedback loop. Fear of failure, causing more fear. A circuit that completed itself every time I thought about being in that situation again. He recommended therapy. I nodded, thanked him, went home, and didn't make an appointment for 3 months. Not because I didn't believe him, because I did believe him. And believing him meant accepting that the problem was in my head, and a problem in your head feels worse than a problem in your body. A body problem is something that happened to you. A head problem is something you're doing to yourself. A body problem gets you sympathy. A head problem gets you a recommendation to talk to someone about your feelings, and at 23 in the world I came from, talking to someone about your feelings was one step below admitting you couldn't change a tire. More pride. More stupid, expensive, life-ruining pride. The same pride that kept the pill in the glove compartment. The same pride that told me real men don't need help. The same pride that had already cost me Karen and was now costing me months of recovery I could have started sooner. I did eventually go to therapy, and it helped. Slowly, the way things help when you're not sure they're helping, until one day you realize the weight on your chest has gotten lighter, and you can't pinpoint the exact moment it shifted. The therapist was a woman in her 40s who sat in a leather chair and asked me questions I didn't want to answer, and waited through silences I tried to fill with jokes. She didn't judge me. She didn't tell me I was broken. She just kept asking why, until I ran out of false answers and the real ones started leaking through. The real answers were ugly. They had to do with control, with masculinity, with the stories I'd absorbed about what a man is supposed to be able to do without thinking, without help, without hesitation. They had to do with the fact that I'd built my entire sense of self around being young and capable and physically reliable. And when that reliability failed in the one arena where it mattered most, my identity cracked like a foundation built on something that couldn't hold weight. She told me the anxiety had probably been building for longer than I realized, that the loneliness, the divorce, the isolation, the year and a half of sitting on a couch in silence, all of it had been compressing inside me like air in a sealed container. And when the pressure finally found an outlet, when I was in a room with a woman I wanted so badly my hands shook, the container didn't open. It ruptured. And the rupture looked like failure, but it was really just everything I'd been carrying finding the worst possible moment to make itself known. That made sense in the therapist's office. It made sense when I said it out loud in a room with soft lighting and a white noise machine humming in the corner. But it didn't change what happened. Understanding why you failed doesn't undo the failure. It just gives you a more articulate way to describe the thing you lost. Because by the time I started getting better, Karen had moved on. Not dramatically, not obviously. She didn't parade a new boyfriend around or post something on social media that was designed for me to see. It was subtler than that. She just stopped existing in my direction. Stopped looking at my house when she walked to the mailbox. Stopped noticing when my car pulled in. Stopped existing in the part of the world that included me. Like she'd quietly redrawn the borders of her life, and I was on the other side of every line. I ran into her at the grocery store once, about 4 months after the second motel night. She was in the cereal aisle with Miles, who was loudly arguing for a box of something covered in cartoon characters. She saw me, and for a second, just 1 second, something flickered across her face. Recognition. Memory. Maybe a trace of warmth that hadn't fully cooled yet. But it passed so fast I might have imagined it. She smiled politely, said hi, Eddie, in the most neutral voice a human being can produce, and went back to negotiating with her son about sugar content. I stood in that aisle holding a box of pasta and felt the full, crushing, total weight of what I'd thrown away. Not because I was careless, not because I was cruel, not because I didn't want her enough, but because my own fear had built a wall between me and the one person who'd made me feel something real in years, and I'd had the tool to tear it down sitting in my glove compartment the entire time, and I'd been too proud to pick it up. That's the moment I think about more than any other. Not the motel rooms, not the silence, not the drive home. That moment in the cereal aisle, holding a box of Penny, watching her walk away with her son, her hair in a ponytail, her cart squeaking on the tile floor, and knowing with absolute, irreversible certainty that the woman I wanted was 12 feet away and completely unreachable. And the distance between us had nothing to do with the aisle, and everything to do with a white paper bag I'd been too proud to open. She pushed her cart around the corner and disappeared, and I stood there for a long time in the middle of a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon and felt something finish inside me. Not break. Finish. The way a chapter finishes. The way a season finishes. The way the last ember in a fire goes from orange to gray, and you realize you've been watching it cool for hours without noticing the exact moment it stopped being warm. That was when I knew it was over. Not because she said it, not because I decided it, because the warmth was gone and neither of us had anything left to feed it. I still live on that street. Same house, same room, same driveway where she walked up to me on a Friday evening and asked if I drove for Uber. Same front door that faces her front door across 40 feet of asphalt that might as well be 40 years. She still lives there too. I see her most mornings if I'm not careful about timing. She takes the kids out around 8. Miles rides his bike now, a real one, not the tricycle. The younger two follow behind with the kind of noisy chaos that fills a whole street. She walks behind them, coffee in hand, watching them the way mothers watch, half relaxed, half ready. She looks good. She looks like a woman who has moved past something without looking back. Some mornings I pull out of my driveway and glance across the street and catch a glimpse of her through her kitchen window, moving around, making breakfast, existing in a life that I was inside for about 5 weeks and will never be inside again. And every time I see her, even from that distance, even through glass, even for half a second, my body does the thing it's been doing since the first time she stood in my driveway with her arms crossed. It wants her. It responds to her. Every signal fires the way it's supposed to fire. Every part of me reaches toward her the way a plant reaches toward light. Every part except the one that mattered. And that's the joke that isn't funny. That's the thing that keeps me awake at 3 in the morning in a dark apartment that used to feel quiet and now feels like a courtroom where I'm on trial every night. My body works. It always worked. The doctor confirmed it. The therapist explained it. The anxiety created the failure, not the other way around. There was never anything wrong with the machinery. The problem was the operator. The operator was so terrified of failing that he guaranteed the failure twice in a row, with a solution sitting in his glove compartment that he was too proud to touch. That's not tragedy. Tragedy is when forces beyond your control destroy something beautiful. This was something else. This was a man standing in front of an open door with the key in his hand, refusing to use it because using it meant admitting the door was locked. And by the time he was ready to admit it, the door wasn't locked anymore, it was gone. The whole wall was gone. There was nothing left to unlock. I think about what she asked me on the phone that morning after the first night. Do you think I'm beautiful? That question lives in me like a splinter I can't reach, because she asked it thinking the answer might be no. She lay in her bed, a woman who'd already been through a marriage that fell apart, a woman who was brave enough to walk across a street and be vulnerable with a stranger. And she wondered if she wasn't enough. Because of me. Because my body told her a lie my mouth would never have said. She was enough. She was more than enough. She was everything. And my body said no while my heart screamed yes, and she heard the no because the no was the only thing that was visible in that room. I wish I could tell her that. I wish I could walk 14 steps across this street and knock on her door and say the thing I've been rehearsing in my head for months, that the problem was never her. That I wanted her so badly my body short-circuited from the weight of it. That desire wasn't what was missing. Courage was, honesty was, the willingness to be small enough to accept help was. And I didn't have any of those things when it mattered, because I was 23 years old and believed that real men don't need pills, and real men don't fail, and real men don't sit on the edge of a motel bed in the dark, unable to look at the woman beside them. Real men. The two most expensive words in my vocabulary. The two words that built the wall between me and the only person who ever made the silence in my life feel like something other than emptiness. But I don't knock. I don't walk over. I don't say any of it. Because some mistakes don't come with a third chance. Some doors close so softly you don't even hear them shut until you reach for the handle and realize it's been locked from the other side for months. And the person who locked it had every right to because you gave her every reason. I keep my grandfather's pocket watch in the kitchen drawer, same spot, same frozen hands pointing at 7:42. I picked it up the other night and held it in my palm, turning it over the way I used to when the apartment was too quiet and I needed something to hold. And I heard his voice, clear and steady, the way it sounded the last time I saw him. The worst thing a man can do is hold on to something so tight he crushes it. I understood that sentence for the first time, not as advice, not as a lesson passed down from a grandfather to a boy too young to know what it meant. As a diagnosis, except he was only half right. Because I didn't crush Karen by holding too tight. I crushed us by holding too tight to something else. To my pride. To the image of myself I couldn't let go of. To the idea that I was young and strong and didn't need help. I gripped that idea with both hands and squeezed until everything else fell through my fingers. The woman, the warmth, The late-night texts, the perfume in my car, the sound of her laugh in the front seat on a 3-hour drive to the beach with her kids asleep in the back, and the ocean getting closer, and my whole life feeling, for the first time, like it was heading somewhere that mattered. All of it. Gone. Because I couldn't open a white paper bag. The bag is still in my glove compartment. I haven't touched it. I haven't thrown it away either. Sometimes I open the compartment to grab a napkin or check the registration, and I see it sitting there small and white and ordinary. And I think about how strange it is that the distance between the best version of my life and the version I'm living now can be measured in something that fits in the palm of my hand. One pill, one honest moment, one decision to be small enough to accept that my body needed help and my pride didn't get a vote. That's all it would have taken. That's all that stood between me and the woman across the street. Not distance, not timing, not compatibility, not some cosmic force that decided we weren't meant to be. Just a 23-year-old kid who thought being a man meant never admitting you couldn't do something on your own. 14 steps between our front doors. I counted them once, late at night, standing on my porch in the dark like a ghost haunting his own street. 14 steps I'll never take. Some mornings I sit in my car before starting a shift, and I look at her house and I let myself feel it one more time. Not the shame, not the failure, just the wanting. The pure, clean, unbroken wanting that was always there and never went away and still hasn't, months later, even though the woman it belongs to has erased me from the borders of her life so completely that the only proof I ever mattered to her is a text thread I can't bring myself to delete, and a memory of perfume in a car that's been washed 100 times since. I wanted her. I want her still, and I will carry that wanting until it fades or until I do, whichever comes first. But the glove compartment is closed, and the street is quiet, and the 14 steps are still there, same as yesterday, same as tomorrow, and the worst part isn't that I failed. The worst part is that I had the fix the whole time, and I was too proud to swallow it. What would you do in this situation? Be honest, or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.